When it comes to dark TV shows, demented cartoons, or generally cursed media, I can't think of many topics I love chatting about more. Okay, maybe demented dolls, but that's it. I just find it so fascinating what has been created over the years and how things do or don't hold up against the test of time. Question for y'all, what's your favorite piece of demented TV knowledge? Let me know in the comments and let's dive into today. Alrighty everybody, I'm kicking off this list with a personal guilty pleasure favorite, the Terms of Endearment episode of Drawn Together. If you're unaware of the premise of the show, it's a parody of house-based reality shows, such as The Real World, The Surreal Life, Big Brother, and it follows the misadventures of said housemates in the fictional show of the same name and uses a sitcom format with a reality TV show setting. They used a lot of caricatures of established cartoon characters and stock characters. Comedy Central advertised it as the first animated reality TV series, and in some episodes the characters participate in challenges that are similar to reality TV challenges. And when I say the show was meant to be politically incorrect, I mean it. Let's go over some of the characters together for context, shall we? Captain Leslie Hero is a sociopathic, chauvinistic, idiotic, perverted, anti-heroic, hetero-flexible, necrophiliac, and just overall icky parody of superheroes. His character is based on the flying brick superhero archetype, think guys like Superman and Shazam. Wuldor Sockbat is a hyperactive, idiotic, gullible SpongeBob knockoff who displays many of the typical reality-defying behaviors that Bugs Bunny might have. Princess Clara is a pampered and bigoted princess. She's a self-professed Christian who repeatedly demonstrates homophobic and racist behavior. Toot Bronstein is a Betty Boop stereotype who will literally die by her own hand if she isn't the center of attention. Sadly, I can't get into detail, but she does a lot of icky and unsafe things to herself. Xander P. Wifflebottom is like a hyper-feminine gay stereotype. There's also a homicidal Pokémon knockoff and other characters I can't even begin to talk about. I'm hoping by now you get the idea. This isn't a show meant for young viewers. So enter the Terms of Endearment episode. Why after all of that did something actually get pulled? So it was produced for the first season, however it was delayed until season 2, and even then barely got released. It actually had to be fixed and edited first. So, what was the premise? In an effort to boost ratings, the producers demanded that Claire and Foxy, who, my bad, Foxy was the character that represented a lot of the black girl character stereotypes at the time, they were told they had to start taking showers together. Captain Hero was like, I'm gonna use my x-ray vision to spy on them. Claire was like, absolutely not, whereas Foxy's like, this is fun, this is fine, use your x-ray vision whenever. Unfortunately, the prolonged exposure to the radiation gives Foxy a brain tumor. Out of grief, Captain Hero decides to strip himself of his powers so he can no longer harm anybody in that fashion ever again, and unfortunately by doing so, he becomes paralyzed from the neck down, since apparently that happens to all superheroes who lose their powers, confining him to a wheelchair. Shortly thereafter, Foxy's radiation poisoning causes her to begin mutating into a stereotypical caricature, causing agents from the Bureau of Cartoon Political Correctness to arrive and take her away to a cartoon erasement camp. Hero realizes that Foxy must be rescued, but unfortunately, he can't do anything. But he's like, okay, we're not gonna give up. He gets all the other housemates together and they head over to the cartoon erasement camp where Foxy and other politically incorrect cartoon stereotypes are being held. When they get there, the housemates discover that Mickey Mouse, whose name is partially bleeped, is leading a plot to eliminate all offensive cartoon characters in order to make the universe the happiest place on Earth. Eventually, Captain Hero is able to reverse the rotation of the Earth and undo all of the terrible events that transpired in the episode. So why was it delayed from airing? Well, it wasn't because of Disney for once. Christopher Reeve died shortly before this episode was supposed to be aired, resulting in Comedy Central deciding, maybe not. So when it finally made it to air, one key scene was altered. According to executive producer Bill Freiberger, Captain Hero originally lost his powers by falling off a horse, which was a parallel to Reeves' accident. So Comedy Central was like, yo, you gotta change this. The episode was almost banned a second time when Reeves' widow, Dana, announced that she had a terminal illness shortly before the episode's rescheduled air date. Yikes. See, that's dark. Number 3, Garfield is hallucinating. Oh, okay. Garfield is one of my favorite comic strips of all time, but in the fall of 1989, Jim Davis produced a series of Halloween-based strips about Garfield waking up to an abandoned house. When Garfield finally accepted that he was alone, he suddenly brought back to his owner John's house. Naturally, the storyline had several readers question the meaning behind these series of strips, and because of these strips' surreality regarding the Halloween story arc, it is commonly believed that Garfield had either died or that he's slowly starving to death, and that the entire strip is his dying dream. Look, this theory does make sense in some places. Throughout the strip, Garfield would often have dreams regarding food and would constantly beg John for his trademark dish, lasagna. So if Garfield's always begging for food and just wants to sleep, oh dear. Number 2, Ash Ketchum has been in a coma since the first episode. So Pokemon is still airing new episodes all the time and follows the adventures of, Ash Ketchum and Pikachu! I don't know a lot about Pokemon, so we're gonna try our best here. Despite over 20 years though of adventures, Ash never really gets much older, and he somehow keeps discovering more and more and more new Pokemon that the world didn't know about in earlier seasons. And that's because those new Pokemon at the time didn't exist. This theory even explains some of the peculiarities of the Pokemon world, such as the consistent presence of certain characters like Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny. So for example, in the very first episode, Ash and Pikachu are attacked by a flock of Spearows in a thunderstorm when, Pikachu blasts everything in the area with a massive jolt of electricity, with Ash at ground zero of said attack. But then he walks off into the sunset like he didn't just sustain a, near lethal electrocution. Or so we all thought apparently. The analysis of Ash's companions and rivals as aspects of himself is a unique interpretation. From Brock representing his repressed sexuality to Gary Oak as a wish fulfillment figure, it offers a fresh perspective on the relationships and character dynamics within the series. The theory also delves into the symbolism of the Pokemons themselves, with each of Ash's Pokemons representing different aspects of his personality and struggles. It's an intriguing way to look at the creatures he befriends and, trains on his journey. Not only are Ash's Pokemon a manifestation of different parts of himself, the Pokemon of other trainers are as well. Koffing and Anaconda were symbolic of Team Rocket's willingness to change, hence their evolutions. Once his mind was able to overcome that roadblock and allow them to change once, it gave him the chance to truly change. An interesting note is that Piputar is a rationalization, a Pokemon's rival caught before they met. Even Ash would become suspicious if everyone he met had no carryover Pokemon from previous places he had been to. Now other trainers are more direct forms of his issues, ones he must either come to terms with or outright suppress. Gym leaders are more primary aspects of his personality, with each Pokemon being stronger than the last to display a level of skill he could only be capable of if he gave into it. In effect, every time he is doing battle with a part of him that he would rather not have in control. Originally Ash had the battles, which evolved into team battles and contests, and the explanation for this is that his issues became more and more complicated and the means of dealing with them needed to become more complex as well. The fact that he uses issues he has already dominated to win is a sign he's growing stronger. Ash releases his Pokemon because his mind is forcing him to, let go of them. The second he raises an overpowered team, a tournament comes up, and after fighting his way through it, he has to go to a new land for new challenges. However, with an overpowered team, there won't be any challenges or any way to motivate him further. The Ash that wants to stay in the coma and keep journeying hands his solved issues over to Professor Oak so he can continue and overcome the unresolved ones, which is, essentially his mind forcing him to deal with his issues. Ash's rivals in the Elite Four are ultimately the strongest part of this cycle. Having Pokemon that are essentially godlike, they represent both what can be attained and what is unattainable. Ash's rivals are all possible futures he envisions for himself, because they're all older than him. The theory's conclusion, where Ash awakens from his coma, either to face a world that has moved on without him or to continue his journey with a newfound determination, is kind of a poignant and thought-provoking scenario. It leaves us with the idea that sometimes our dreams and desires can become a powerful driving force in our lives. In the end, this theory kind of provides a unique and complex interpretation of the Pokemon series, turning it into a tale of self-discovery and growth within the confines of a dream world. Honestly, that kind of checks. Number 1, cars overthrew mankind. It's not often that crazy fan theories are confirmed by higher-ups that are actually involved with the franchise. No matter how sound a conspiracy may be, it's often left up to fans to decide for themselves without any real answers. But in the case of the Cars movie and franchise, a disturbing theory was actually confirmed by the creative director himself, Jay Ward. So the theory goes that in the universe of Cars, we don't see humans because they simply don't exist anymore. When the Cars became sentient beings, they realized there was no need for humans and they them all. And to add insult to injury, Ward confirmed that the Cars in fact take on the personality of the last person who drove them. So this seems to imply that the Cars somehow literally consumed all of the people in the world and took on their personalities. So would this make them soul-sucking cars? Well, it doesn't get much worse than that. Hi, iRobot. You're looking pretty familiar right now. Also, when it comes to overall Disney cursed things, does anybody remember the fly from The Emperor's New Groove? Just a little sidebar here. The fly that gets killed by the spider while screaming, "Help me, help me!" Okay, well, did anybody notice how the only animals that can talk in the movie are the ones that were once human? That means that the spider ate a human. Oh, the more reason not to like the little creeps.
Starting off this countdown, we have Real Monsters. This show is about monsters in training. Ickis, Crumb, and Oblina are all monsters who attend a school to learn how to frighten humans. Now, the design of these monsters alone are terrifying. Let's start off with the scariest looking one, Crumb. Just look at him. Okay, he's a weird creature that literally has detached eyes, so he's always stuck holding them in the air. And then he's just covered in hair and looks disturbing. His scare tactic is to use his grossness to frighten humans. Next, we have Oblina. Oblina is a long black and white serpent looking monster. She can contort her body in many ways and can scare humans with her teeth, lips, and tongue. Then you have Ickis, who looks like a little gremlin. Ickis can become red and his teeth turn sharp when he scares people. These monsters alone are they're horrifying. But honestly, I applaud the animators. Like, they definitely got creative with these characters. Like, who comes up with this naked looking dude that's holding up his eyes? Incredible. In our fourth spot, we have Tales from the Crypt Keeper. I'm sure all you 90s kids remember this show, because I certainly do. So this show was inspired by the comic series and the adult HBO show Tales of the Crypt. They then altered it to make it child friendly. So they removed the blood and the gore from the live action show, but there were still some episodes that were quite horrifying, especially for young children. Alright, so the Crypt Keeper plays the host of the show who introduces what each episode is going to be about. The series then goes on and talks about classic legends like vampires, zombies, and werewolves, so on. Now, in the episode titled The Weeping Woman, Camille and Mildred visit a haunted Victorian mansion. At night, they are woken up by creepy moaning and objects flying around. That's when they see the Weeping Woman, an old, eyeless, and teethless woman with scraggly gray hair and long black nails. The second night, the woman looks even more terrifying with red glowing eyes. She ends up chasing the girls around the house. Then you have the episode titled Sharon Share-alike. This is an episode about a girl named Shauna who refuses to share her toys with her little sister Katie. As a result, she hides one of her old toy dolls in the vent so her sister can't play with it. Then the doll ends up coming alive and haunting her. This episode is freaking creepy, with the doll just coming alive and saying things like, "You're not nice, I don't like you," in that creepy doll voice. The doll ends up chasing her all over the house, giggling and chanting her name. If you find dolls creepy, then that episode is not for you.
Okie dokie, time to move on to a show that's a little less dark as a whole, the classic Dudley Do-Right show. Dudley Do-Right is a fictional character who originally appeared as the main protagonist of Dudley Do-Right of the Mounties. He's a dim-witted but conscientious and cheerful Canadian Mountie who works for Inspector Fenwick. Do-Right is always trying to catch his nemesis, Snidely Whiplash, and rescue Inspector Fenwick's daughter, damsel in distress Nell Fenwick, with whom Do-Right is deeply infatuated. He usually succeeds only by pure luck or through the actions of his horse, aptly named Horse. So, in theory, a himbo. How in tarnation did an episode of a wholesome show like this get the boot? Never mind, only the second episode of the first season? Alright, well, let's discuss the episode, Stokey the Bear. When the Lumberjacks working on Mount Up prepare to go to work, they are surprised to see the entire forest go up in flames. Not only that, the lumber camp and everything was on fire. It seems that Stokey, who used to lead the fight against forest fires, was now under the hypnotic influence of Snidely Whiplash, and was now leading the fight for forest fires. Constable Dudley Do-Right soon picks up Stokey's trail and follows him into Quebec, and into a firehouse. When the fire bell rings, the firemen rush out, only to find that it was actually their firehouse that was on fire. So while the men are fighting the fire, Do-Right spots Stokey just roasting marshmallows and pursues him onto the roof of the building. By now the building is burning out of control, but Dudley rushes in to rescue the bear. Having pleaded Stokey's case, Do-Right takes Stokey for a change of scenery to Chicago. There Stokey starts a major fire, and Do-Right convinces somebody else to blame it on their cow. Stokey the Bear was an obvious parody of the popular Smokey the Bear, who was the mascot for the US Forest Service. They took a little bit of an issue with their main guy being shown lighting fires and not really giving a damn. Also, the closing references to a fire in Chicago suggest that it was actually Stokey that started the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. So I think this next example is the only episode of something I'll talk about today that was banned for genuinely being unsafe, and not just dark in context. So youngins from the 90s, this is a question for you. Do you remember hearing about a killer Pokemon episode? I wasn't familiar with the game or the show at the time, so I can't confirm or deny the rumors on my own, so let me know in the comments. I need y'all's help. So while the rumors were greatly exaggerated, there was some truth to them. In Season 1, Episode 28, titled Electric Soldier Porygon, Ash and his friends find that there is something wrong with the Pokeball's transmitting device at the local Pokemon Center. To find out what's wrong, they've got to go inside the machine. 20 minutes into the episode, Pikachu stops missiles with his Thunderbolt attack, resulting in an explosion that flashes red and blue lights. Although there were similar parts in the episode also with similar flashes, two anime techniques called Paka Paka and Flash made this scene particularly intense. These flashes were bright strobe lights, blinks at a rate of about 12 Hz for approximately 6 seconds. So at this point, some of the viewers experienced blurred vision, headaches, dizziness, and nausea. Others suffered from seizures, blindness, convulsions, and unconsciousness. Japan's Fire Defense Agency reported that 685 viewers, roughly 310 boys, 375 girls, were taken to hospitals by ambulances. Although many victims recovered during the ambulance trip, more than 150 were admitted to hospitals, and I think 2 were hospitalized for at least 2 weeks or more. Thankfully, nobody actually passed away, but out of an abundance of caution, the episode was never shown on television ever again. Actually, after this incident, the show went into a 4-month hiatus to be like, okay, we gotta reevaluate. Next up is a show I can't say I've ever watched myself, The Ren and Stimpy Show. It often pushed the envelope of good taste, but one episode crossed the line to the point where Nickelodeon was like, we're not airing this. The series follows the misadventures of Ren, an emotionally unstable and psychopathic Chihuahua dog, and Stimpy, a good-natured and dim-witted Manx cat. The show generated significant controversy for its dark humor, innuendos, adult humor, violence, and shock value. All of the controversy contributed to the production staff's altercations with Nickelodeon's Standards and Practices Department. Some segments of the show were altered to exclude references to religion, politics, booze, violence, and tobacco. The episode Powdered Toast Man had a cross removed from the Pope's hat, and the credit was changed to The Man with the Pointy Hat. The same episode had a segment featuring the burning of the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights that was removed, while in a different episode, Dog Show, the last name of the character, George Liquor, was removed, being changed to George American. And a lot of other episodes included somebody smoking a cigar, pipe, or cigarette. Several episodes had violent, gruesome, or suggestive scenes shortened or removed, including a sequence involving a severed head, a close-up of Ren's face being grated against a man's stubble, etc., etc., etc. The episode that was never supposed to make it to air was titled Man's Best Friend, and it was deemed too controversial because of a scene where Ren harms George Liquor with an oar. Coupled with references to tobacco, as well as some boundary-pushing toilet humor, Nickelodeon was like, nope. The controversial creator of the show was actually fired after submitting the episode, not directly because of it, but this was the final straw. So years later on Spike TV, the show's revival, Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon, debuted with this banned episode as their unofficial pilot. Alrighty folks, we're ending today with an obvious title, South Park. Look, I'll be honest with you, I've never personally been a fan of this show, not my cup of tea, so make of that what you will. The series revolves around 4 boys, Stan Marsh, Kyle Broflovsky, Eric Cartman, and Kenny McCormick, and their exploits in and around the titular Colorado town. South Park also features many recurring characters, and the series became infamous for its profanity and dark surreal humor that satirizes a large range of subject matter. The pilot episode was produced using cutout animation. The remainder of the series uses computer animation, recalling the prior technique. Since the 4th season, episodes are generally written and produced during the week preceding its broadcast. South Park has always attracted controversy. The massively popular adult cartoon has pushed the boundaries of good taste and decency ever since its initial premiere in 1997. Yeah, the damn thing is as old as I am, so I've never known a world without it. Which hey, a lot of that is why it's so popular. But there are 2 episodes in particular that were simply too much and resulted in some very real and scary problems. The 2 episodes in question, simply titled 200 and 201, featured offensive jokes at the expense of the Prophet Muhammad. Trey Parker and Matt Stone spent much of the episode 200 teasing the appearance of Muhammad, which in the Muslim religion is a massive, blasphemous no-no. When episode 201 aired, it was heavily edited to hide Muhammad's appearance to tamper any potential outrage. Nevertheless, the creators of the show received numerous death threats, and the vocal outrage was insane. 3 weeks after the initial airing of the episodes, a car explosion attempt was foiled in Times Square. Now, while there were no concrete connections between the attempted explosion and the South Park episodes, it was certainly speculated. In turn, the episodes were removed from air and later banned across all streaming platforms. Number 5, all the Rugrats are dead. So when it comes to this fan theory, it turns out all those adorable little ones on Rugrats were nothing more than the projections of a year-old's psychological breakdown. Angelica is typically the character we all hated when we were younger, but in retrospect, she clearly has some pretty extreme neglect issues with her parents. Her mom is always on the phone with work, and her relationship with her dad is superficial at best. We all thought Angelica was just moody because of her age and spoiled upbringing, but here it's said that her attitude is actually due to the traumatic events of the Rugrats' deaths. The Rugrats were really a figment of Angelica's demonic and unimaginable imagination. Try saying that 5 times fast. Apparently Chucky died in 1986 along with his mother. That's why Chaz is a nervous wreck all the time. Tommy was born in 1988, but didn't make it past birth, which is why Stu was constantly in the basement making toys for the son who never had a chance to live. The DeVilles terminated a pregnancy in 1990, and Angelica couldn't figure out what the gender should be, so the twins were just sort of gender to be determined. As for all grown up, the teenage Angelica became addicted to various narcotics, which further aggravated her schizophrenia, bringing her back to her childhood and thus her creations she obsessed over. Because of the time lapse between the present and the last time she interacted with her creations, she made them older. Now, Angelica was apparently constantly taking hits of so she would never have to live without her creations, who were her only company. In a judgmental world, Angelica's mom actually passed away of a spicy spoon juice overdose in 1982, just after Angelica was born, and Drew in his depression married a gold-digging that Angelica idolized because she fooled herself into thinking it was her real mom, but always had a concept of her mom, Cynthia, and took a Barbie doll and made it after her mom's image, wearing an unwashed orange dress and having, messy hair, which is why she was so attached to it. Later in life, like I said, she followed her mom's footsteps with all those bad things, dying of overdose at age barely teens when All Grown Up was cancelled. The only Rugrat to not be fictional, however, was Dill. However, Angelica didn't know the difference between Dill and her creations, although Dill didn't follow her commands. After endless crying and a refusal to disappear like the others did when Angelica was angry with them, she took out her anger on him. And due to this, he sustained a brain hemorrhage, which resulted in a deformation, and as he grew up, his damage only became more evident, and by the time he was, made it to all grown up age, he lived as an outcast, being ridiculed for his weirdness. The immense guilt over this is what led Angelica to her, no snow and spicy spoon juice use, and uncreate the Rugrats briefly, until her experiences with hallucinogenics. On a pair-ship to find love, Chaz married a woman named Kira. He was actually going to marry a different woman named Coco, but she just wanted him for his money, who had a daughter named Kimmy that was torn from her because she was a no-snow addict. Now, Angelica imagined her from Kira's stories. Chaz lost his mind after the death of his wife and was in denial that she was ever a woman of the night. So upon to America, Chaz and Kira married, and she got her green card. It was actually a really happy and romantic story. Kira sadly continually struggled with addiction, but was apparently relatively happy with her life in Chaz. Susie was Angelica's only real friend, who entertained the thought of Angelica's creations, for, her sake. Angelica spent the last days of her life in the back of the school cafeteria, imagining friends around her and playing with the lives of her creations. Yeah, my brain hurts. Why did she imagine, little ones and not folks her own age? Well, since her relationship is mostly non-existent with her parents, the only time they show any kind of emotion towards her is when they're disciplining her, which to a neglected little one comes off as cruelty. She imagines them as, young, because she needs someone she can be an authority figure with, because that's the only relationship that Angelica understands. Yeah, my brain's spinning. Number 4, Ed, and Eddy all live in purgatory. These theories really have a way of turning innocent shows into eerie mysteries. Some theorists propose that these 3 misfits are stuck in purgatory. It's a haunting concept, suggesting that their afterlife is intertwined with their traumatic pasts. Rolf, the first to arrive in this eerie realm, brought his farm life with him, choosing to neglect the cattle to play with the other lost souls. Then there's Johnny, who befriended Rolf, and even in death, he's joined by his imaginary friend Plank as they wander aimlessly through the afterlife. Eddy, the schemer from New York, met his end when a swindling attempt went awry, drowning in the river, and even now he's still chasing the almighty dollar. The brother and sister, Sarah and Ed, came next, both escaping the chaos of World War II in their unique ways, but a car wreck in 1953 ended their lives. Naz, the flower power human of the late 60s, met a gruesome end at the hands of a serial ender. Trauma caused her to shut out family in the afterlife, giving her more time to party and flirt. Ed, the intellectual with controlling parents, met his demise in a fiery explosion caused by a Bunsen burner. Kevin, the angry and cynical boy from a broken home, was sadly physically punished to death by his very bad father, and in the afterlife he changed his perception of his father but continued his bullying ways. Jimmy, the sickly, little one, died of leukemia, isolated in his room, neglected by the outside world. And then there are the Canker sisters, sent from hell to torment the neighborhood. Their demonic origins grant them supernatural abilities, making them feared by everyone, including the Eds. Hey, this purgatory theory adds quite the sinister layer to the quirky world of Ed, and Eddy, wouldn't you think?
Moving on at number 3, we have Ren and Stimpy. Ren and Stimpy is another classic cartoon. This time, this one is known to be more dark and twisted. So Ren and Stimpy is a satirical animated show about Ren, an aggressive, mentally unstable chihuahua, and Stimpy, a dim-witted cat. Now, okay, yes, I understand, the show is meant to be more dark for the sake of comedy, but there are still moments where people have definitely been creeped out. In fact, one episode of Ren and Stimpy titled Man's Best Friend was banned from Nickelodeon because of its extreme violence. But yet, that's not the only episode that's been filled with explicit content. In the episode titled Stimpy's Fan Club, Ren and Stimpy receive a bunch of fan mail, however, it's all for Stimpy and none for Ren. That night, Ren goes completely insane from the jealousy. He stays awake, talking to himself and feeling guilt for writing letters back, insulting the fans. In this scene, they actually make a really clever reference to the play of Macbeth, with Ren claiming that his hands are dirty and the dirt won't come off. The episode continues with him planning to murder Stimpy in his sleep by snapping his neck. His brain then begins to sting and swell before he's engulfed by the flames of hell. Oh, did that rhyme? It did. In another episode titled Rubber Nipple Salesman, Ren and Stimpy own a rubber nipple business and go door to door in their neighborhood to sell their product. They knock on the door of one house and a horse answers the door. This horse is clearly a deranged killer. He ends up looking at them and saying, maybe I should make another mistake, maybe 2 more. The way he says it is just way more creepier. Then he pulls out a walrus and asks them if they have any rubber walrus protectors. The walrus begs them to call the police. Okay, it's actually quite hilarious, but then if you think about it, very, very creepy. In our second spot, we have Martin Mystery. Honestly, I love this show. It's really well done. It's like the perfect balance between comedy, mystery, and horror. And can't lie, I had a little crush on Martin, but I know I wasn't the only one. So this show surrounds Martin Mystery and Diana Lombard, 2 16-year-old step-siblings that work for an organization referred to as the Center. Basically, their job is to solve cases and protect people from supernatural threats. And we can't forget about Java, a 200,000-year-old caveman that also helps them with their investigations. So there are multiple episodes that are just completely messed up. The one that I remember giving me nightmares when I was younger is the episode titled Revenge of the Doppelganger. Basically in this episode, women are being attacked by some kind of electrical shadow that completely erases their faces. Again, I'm rhyming, I'm so good. Okay. In the episode, this creature attacks multiple women that all have similar features and steals their faces, leaving them looking like creepy mannequins. And then we have the episode The Body Swappers, which is a reference to the movie The Thing. This episode begins with a young girl fleeing for her life from some kind of creature. All you can hear are her screams as the monster attacks her. Basically, this organism creature goes around using humans as its hosts. In the episode, the organism gets to Diana and eventually turns her into this monster with large sharp teeth. Ugh. The monster itself is a big slimy creature with huge fangs and long tentacles. There are plenty of other horrifying creatures seen throughout the series, like the Boogeyman, a giant humanoid with red glowing eyes and 3 branches on his forehead, Hexen, a 15-foot tall eyeless creature, and the Mothman. No explanation needed for that one. And in our number 1 spot, we have Courage the Cowardly Dog. How on earth was I allowed to watch this show as a kid? From possession to demons and sadistic villains, this show is anything but kid-friendly. So this show is about Courage, a pinkish-purple anthropomorphic dog, and his owners, Eustace and Muriel Bagg. Each episode, they are encountered by a paranormal or supernatural entity or force, and Courage, who is anything but courageous, has to save his owners. Now, this show is just filled with creepy villains, gore, and violence. One of the episodes that scared me as a kid was the one titled King Ramses' Curse. That's right, the Egyptian pharaoh makes an appearance in this episode. So Eustace ends up finding and keeping an ancient Egyptian slab. As a result, he is visited by King Ramses. The king appears outside their home and just sways back and forth, repeating in a creepy whisper, "Return the slab." That alone can send shivers down anyone's spine. Then you have the episode Freaky Fred, where Muriel's cousin Fred comes into town to visit. Fred looks insane with his creepy wide-mouthed smile and slanted eyebrows. What's even worse is that he has creepy inner dialogue that only the audience can hear, which, may I add, is entirely in rhymes. And then we find out that he has an obsession with shaving people until they are bald. He ends up getting locked in the bathroom with Courage, where he shaves off all of his fur. You can see Courage shaking in fear as Fred does the deed. And while this happens, sounds of creepy children singing fill the screen. And let's not forget about the episode where Muriel gets possessed. That's right, she gets possessed from demons in her mattress. In one scene, she is laughing menacingly while her head spins around in a circle before her head just falls off. In another scene, she opens her mouth and a giant bumpy tongue extends out and licks Eustace. Then she vomits green slime all over him. Obviously, it's a reference to the Exorcist movies. But in every episode, there is at least one scary or disturbing thing that happens.
Whoop Ass Stew, A Sticky Situation is a one-reel film and the first ever appearance of what is now known as the Powerpuff Girls. So if you watch it, the opening title begins with an early version of Professor Utonium using the original recipe of sugar, spice, and everything nice to try try and create the perfect girl, but then he accidentally adds a can of whoop-ass and creates, the girls. In a similar way to the current series, the girls race towards an early gangrene gang and beat them up. So this was a project that Craig McCracken made while at Cal Arts College in 1992. He sent it off to Cartoon Network while working at Hanna-Barbera Studios, and they renamed it Powerpuff Girls because the original name was a little bit inappropriate for the channel's target audience. McCracken actually had 4 shorts planned out, but only this first one got finished due to Cartoon Network's lack of interest in the original concept. And yes, they were like, you had to make some other changes as well. And while the name was changed, not a lot else was. But let's go over a couple of them. Originally, Professor Utonium looked like an aged, bald version of Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory, with a different head shape and a head mirror. And in this short, the girls didn't seem to have any superpowers except the ability to fly and breathe in space. Despite the lack of superpowers though, it can be said that the girls were definitely more brutal here, as instead of merely knocking around the gangrene boys, they deliberately killed the amoeba boys. In this short, these guys were capable of committing actual crimes and even knew how to use weapons. Boss Man had a cigar in his mouth, Slim had really sharp teeth, and Junior had freckles. They all had purple spots on their bodies instead of the light blue ones, and their voices were a lot more garbled. In the final series that we know and love, these guys are completely inept at crime. They're more of a nuisance than anything. Slim's body is a lighter color compared to Bossman and Junior, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the Powerpuff Girls as we know it, adult references and humor are packed into the background of many of these seemingly sweet and innocent episodes. But just kinda neat to know what could have been. For a while, fans of Adventure Time were certain the fantastical land of Aaahh was actually set years in the future after a devastating apocalypse, and that theory seemed to have been confirmed in the Season 2 episode Videomakers, which references the devastating Mushroom War. However, it actually took the show's creator much longer to recognize the dystopian setting Finn was romping around in. The accidental genius of Adventure Time is the apocalypse was added as the show developed, and the intentional genius was the decision to keep the apocalypse secondary. Pendleton Ward admitted that a lot of the show's canon is created by a writer for a single episode, and then it just sticks for the rest of the series. So it wasn't until Season 1's Episode 8 that Ward realized he had set Adventure Time in a post-apocalyptic world. Up to that point, he thought he created a fantasy land. However, when a scourge of businessmen rose up from a lake in the episode Business Time, he realized, oh, the fans are right. So this show, in presenting relatively stable societies that grow after the Mushroom War, actually might be more realistic than its adult counterparts when it comes to presenting a post-apocalyptic society. Look, if I were to tell you, okay, post-apocalypse world, what do you got? It's a stereotype. Ruined cities, silent and buried, all these survivors mutated, monstrous, dark. But then you look at shows like Futurama, and they give us glimpses of that while poking mild fun. So then in Adventure Time, some mangled, broken debris does give us a bit of an indication that this was once our world, but very little survived the war, and what did was altered. But not always for the worse. Magic was set loose on the world, which is hard to consider disastrous. At the end of the day, Finn and Jake are not holy fools or inhabitants of a new Eden, both of which are tropes of other kinds. They're just two folks living as best they can. Survival is not the be-all end-all presented by most apocalyptic fiction. Heck, it can even be fun.
Coming in at number 3, we've got Hey Arnold. Now let's ignore everyone's odd head shapes and the fact that Arnold makes Helga's girlhood tremble for a moment. These are inappropriate topics for another day. Instead, we'll look at some of the wildest, scariest moments from the show supposedly meant for children. Living in an inner city tenement comes with its fair share of modern horrors like crime and poverty and lack of air conditioning, but Hey Arnold packs in more than a few horror movie scares as well. Take the haunted train, for example. Arnold and his friends come across a ghastly locomotive complete with scar-covered, accordion-toting spirit who promises to take them all to hell. Are you allowed to say that on kids' TV? Then there's Wheeze and Ed, the charcoal-scratched, fear-inspiring gangster from years gone by. Introducing kids to a Goonies-style treasure buried by a serial strangler? Nightmare fuel. And of course there's the Ghost Bride. No cop-out here, this is as real as ghost stories can get. In a cartoon anyways. It's a tale of revenge where a woman literally axe murders her ex-fiancé before committing suicide herself. She was even found humming Here Comes the Bride before taking her life. Goodness gracious. So while it seems like a fun and safe cartoon on the surface, Hey Arnold packs in enough urban legends, ghost stories, and hard knocks to convince a kid the world is a scary place. maybe that's not the worst lesson out there. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Unfortunately, my meme-addled brain can't think about this show without thinking, Buenos dias, Mandy! But I digress. This is a television show about the literal embodiment of death following around a couple of school-aged children. Come on. It's crazy how many different horrors the creators can pack into every episode of this show. Like, the first episode is literally about preventing death from taking a hamster, which is already a weird lesson about the sanctity of life. From there, we meet all sorts of creatures that most folks would probably never want to come face to face with. Jeff the spider desperately pining for Billy's love, an alternate universe Pinocchio who's hungry for flesh, a cosmic terror in Nurgle Jr., and more. These are all monsters that, if shown to the right kid, could cause nightmares for life. And it doesn't stop there. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy is also chock full of some absolutely wicked body horror. They pull no punches. Often, Billy will end up as a slapstick punchline, but unlike most cartoons, there are bloody, gutty consequences to each action. It's kind of like watching an episode of Itchy and Scratchy if that was a real television program. We get to see Billy's skin pulled back in every which way, his nose gets digested, every limb is grotesquely twisted, his eyes are sometimes pulled out of his head and more. And that's just Billy. Some side characters are subjected to similar levels of pain. All in all, while largely goofy and silly, there are some really funky images and situations here, and some kids might not be able to handle them. Those kids might be the ones who need to see it most though. And finally at number 1, we've got Ren and Stimpy. Speaking of abhorrent images, beloved by kids and animators alike, Ren and Stimpy is a truly unique and fascinating watch. However, there are so many questionable moments and creepy over-detailed close-ups in the show, it's a miracle any child grew up normal, whatever normal means. Now, this series is no stranger to controversy. Throughout its lifespan, Ren and Stimpy had episodes altered, censored, and outright cancelled due to violent, disturbing, and oftentimes lewd content. Years later, there was even a spin-off called Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon, where they really leaned into those less appropriate themes. I suppose we'll focus on the original run for this video, as it did originally air on Nickelodeon. I mentioned body horror earlier in this video, and when it comes to animated violence that makes you want to jump out of your skin, nobody does it like Ren and Stimpy. One time, Ren literally took a pair of tweezers and yanked the nerve endings out of his gums. Yes, it is as uncomfortable as it sounds. There's a gag where a jester trapped in some gallows cheese grates his arms, which results in a particularly detailed close-up of his bloody elbow, squeezes a lemon on it, and then tops it all off with salt. Why? Other gags include the removal of one's skin to go skinny dipping, a detailed explanation of how exactly Ren will kill Stimpy and his cousin, repeated eyeball poking and gouging, and the extremely grody and detailed depiction of flesh-eating parasites. And that doesn't even begin to cover it all. It's gross, it's creepy, it's unsettling, it's fascinating.
Coming in at number 5, we have Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice aired back in the 90s and focused on the life of goth girl Lydia Dietz and her undead friend Beetlejuice as they explore the netherworld, a ghoulish, wacky, monster, supernaturalistic realm inhabited by ghosts, ghouls, goblins, and zombies. Like many spooky shows, it relied heavily on parodying famous films, books, and TV shows, including the episode Brides of Funkenstein, which is of course an homage to the Bride of Frankenstein, something most children would not pick up on, nor should they. Now, throughout the series, Beetlejuice attempts to scam residents of the netherworld as well as the real world, including an incident from babysitting in which he literally sits on the grotesque netherworld babies to then trying to beat them in an auto race. Some episodes of the children's show are surprisingly self-aware, including the episode where he acts like the ghost with the most money as CEO of a huge TV station who has absolutely zero compassion. Saying all of this, the show is significantly tamer than the movie, with the cartoon version being portrayed as mischievous rather than outright malevolent. Saying that though, the show is a lot to handle for the average kid, but not me, because I'm Coming in at number 4, we have The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy is a cartoon that aired on the Cartoon Network back in the early 2000s and followed two children, Billy, a slow-witted happy-go-lucky boy, and Mandy, his dark and cynical best friend, who, after winning a limbo game to save Billy's pet hamster, gain the mighty Grim Reaper as their best friend in eternal servitude and slavery. Throughout the course of the show, Billy and Mandy use Grimm's supernatural abilities and powers to venture into supernatural locations, such as the underworld or the netherworld, inhabited by monstrous and grotesque beasts. Oh yeah, the show is also filled to the brim with body horror.
saying that this is certainly not a show for faint-hearted children, even packs a punch as an adult. Now, Grim is terrifying to look at, with him being portrayed as the classic Grim Reaper, often wearing a long black robe with red on the hood. He's also around 6'6" and weighs only 77 pounds. Not to mention, he is also seen with his scythe, an object that is said to be of tremendous magical energy and power in the series, and the source of most of Grimm's abilities and powers. It's also a weapon that can kill people.
So the Walt Disney Company has been known to reuse the odd idea or two. Being resurrected from the dead via acts of true love is just one of them. But have you ever been watching a Disney movie and had a bit of déjà vu? Not just that, oh, this movie has that familiar Disney look and feel sort of thing, but more like, I swear I've literally seen this exact scene before in another movie? Well, it turns out it's not just plot lines Disney has recycled, but actual animation as well. And the evidence is there in plain sight, but you gotta ask, like, why? So, there's some rumors here. Let's go through them and then we'll go through the truth. One big rumor goes that in the 1970s, when Disney movies like Robin Hood came out, the studio was broke, and recycling old animation was a cheap way to make ends meet. So during the Phony King of England, some of Maid Marian's dance moves are rotoscoped from those of Snow White, and also Duchess. Maid Marian's design was eventually reused for that of Vixie's from The Fox and the Hound, although Vixie is less anthropomorphic and more realistic looking. However, while that would have certainly saved some time from designing and planning new movement sequences, it isn't the whole truth. According to Floyd Norman, a Disney animator, the director of Robin Hood and Winnie the Pooh, Wolfgang Reitherman, wanted to play it safe by using animation he knew worked. Look, at the end of the day, after Walt passed away in 1966, the studio lost its guiding star, and Disney's profits from their animation features went down. So what Wolfgang was doing was perhaps an attempt to recapture some of the Walt Disney magic by sticking with the old charm. And then we got all those films from that period that featured direct copies of the studio's older animations, just rotoscoped. It's kind of like some of the nostalgia baiting unnecessary sequels we see today. But these movies were like, okay, original movie, just we're gonna take what we like. Alright, here's the reality. Disney's been recycling its animation for various movie scenes since it created Dumbo in 1941. According to Floyd, Walt Disney himself probably never even knew or noticed that animators were recycling scenes. He was focused more on the big picture. And while he was concerned with details, this was something he was like, it works. At the end of the day, animators are magicians. Whatever tools they use to make the magic happen, so be it. You're doing amazing, folks. If you want to talk about movie Easter eggs, A113 is perhaps one of the greatest and most elusive ones there is. If you look closely enough, in almost every single Pixar feature, you'll find that silly little code concealed in the depths of CGI. But what exactly does it mean? So the answer takes us back all the way to Pixar's origins. The spirit of Pixar was cultivated by names such as John Lasseter, Pete Docter, Andrew Stanton, and Brad Bird. Those folks are all alumni of the prestigious California Institute of Arts. And what's more, they and many other future Pixar animators all learned their craft in the same classroom, A113. It was apparently a dingy and cramped room, mind you, but nevertheless, it was a place where Pixar would essentially be born. And it's thought that Brad Bird began the fun tradition of hiding A113 in Disney films, starting with The Brave Little Toaster. The tradition continued with the development of Pixar, appearing in the studio's first feature, Toy Story. Now, if you're more of an audio Easter egg person, the incredible John Ratzenberger has a voice role in almost every single Pixar movie ever made. Sometimes it's a main part that's easy to find, such as Ham in Toy Story, but other times it's a little more tricky to suss it out. And he's not the only one. Alan Tudyk is another Disney voice Easter egg. He's done a lot of super fun voices over the years. We all love Hey Hey, right? And finally for today, by their very nature, cartoons aren't exactly intended to be realistic. Okay, how many grand pianos have you been crushed by lately? But besides all that fun stuff, there's something distinctly unrealistic about classic cartoons. Their fingers. Just take notice of your favorite cartoon characters. Chances are they only have 4 digits. And that's because around the early 20th century, when animation was still new, it was super expensive. In fact, adjusted for inflation, Disney's 1928 7-minute short, Steamboat Willie, cost over $87,000. Granted, Pixar movies nowadays cost as much as $100,000 per minute of animation, but those modern flicks are a lot more complex. And Disney has a ton more resources available now than it did way back when. Back then, Disney animators had to be kinda thrifty. They realized that drawing just one less finger saved a ton of time, which in turn saved heaps and heaps of money. The cost effectiveness is only just part of the reason why classic cartoons look like cartoons. Realism was just too much, and it was too expensive. characters were aesthetically simplified. Even in more recent times, animators have created similar shortcuts, such as Ursula the Octopus having only 6 tentacles instead of 8. Intriguingly, given that cartoon fingers need to be large enough to see individually, animators have also concluded that 5 fingers just don't look right. Walt Disney even said himself that if Mickey Mouse had 5 fingers, his hands would look like bunches of bananas, and nobody wants that. Also, speaking of Mickey's hands, what's the deal with those gloves? What's he hiding? While it's possible that Mickey's fingers might look all kinds of weird under those gloves, there are indeed a few key official reasons why classic cartoon characters like Mickey wear those white gloves. Similar to the 4-finger situation, drawing gloves was quicker and easier, which cuts down money. Also, hands present a lot of time-consuming challenges. You got those joints, you got the nails. Whereas gloves, easy peasy, you don't have to worry about the little details. It also had to do with color back in the day. Color TVs weren't mainstream until the 1960s, so characters like Mickey Mouse began in black and white. So for Mickey, having a mostly black body, it made sense for him to have contrasting white hands, so then they didn't get lost. Fun fact, in Steamboat Willie, he didn't have gloves yet. Almost Naked Animals was a Canadian series that was originally produced for YTV that also aired on Cartoon Network in the US and many other places around the world, and the title alone just boggles my mind. The amount of focus groups and levels of management that this would have had to clear to make it to air, out of all the pitches that got made back in 2010, this got the green light? Alrighty. So this show is set inside a tropical resort called the Banana Cabana. Try saying that 5 times fast. All of the cabana staff members and residents are funny animals who have shaved off their fur and wear only underclothes. An anthropomorphic dog named Howie is the manager and leader of this motley crew, and each episode follows Howie and his misfit staff having unusual adventures. And I'm sorry, I just can't get over the character design. And also the way the characters move just seems kind of bad and looks kind of robotic. I watched a couple of episodes last night to get an idea of the show, and honest to goodness, they gave me nightmares. The characters look like so out of it every episode. They're just ugly to look at, and like the really main character traits are just being obnoxious, annoying, and stupid. There's really no point in the show where it's really serious. It's just the same stupid humor and cracking some jokes that just didn't fly with me. The voices are extremely grating to listen to, and that's not on the voice actors. That's on the direction. I can't think of a single joke in the show that I found funny. The punchlines of each joke are just so unbelievably weak. You get what they're going for, but it's not funny. The rest of the jokes are predictable, lazy, which just kind of ruins the whole concept of this show. It's trying to be a comedy, and it's failing. So each episode of the show consists of kind of boring, uninspired, and predictable plot lines that just are kind of meh. The pacing's very out of place, and everything feels rushed. It also has a lot of elements of like rip-off SpongeBob SquarePants, where you've got the main character who's suspiciously optimistic like SpongeBob. Howie and his sister's relationship feels similar to that of Plankton and Mr. Krabs, and the Banana Cabana is the Krusty Krab. Wearing underwear could lead one to believe these wacky cartoon creatures are hiding something under those garments, and that's just so weird for a show targeted towards a younger audience. I'm actually surprised the show was successful enough to run for 3 seasons, seeing how horribly it's aged. Probably the most popular title on our list today, CatDog was a creative 90s Nickelodeon cartoon featuring a half-cat, half-dog creature who gets into wacky hijinks as its prissy cat half and rambunctious dog half are forever at odds. Some of the reasons that CatDog was super weird are inherent in the concept. A cat and a dog attached at the stomach is unnatural, even before you start thinking about the implications. But those implications are actually kind of terrifying. So like, how do they go to the bathroom? No one knows for sure, but there's no possible explanation that isn't horrific. But the weird premise is not what makes this show creepy. Rather, a handful of episodes that decided, hey, you know what, let's send some folks to therapy for the rest of their lives. Cat and dog spend a disturbing amount of time just hanging out inside of each other's mouths. In one iconic clip, Winslow walks in on the two of them standing in their room while Cat is, just rummaging around inside Dog's mouth. In another episode, Cat attempts to sneakily brush Dog's teeth by crawling inside his own mouth, traveling up through its body towards the dog half and exiting the dog's mouth. At this point, Cat is somehow inside out, with exposed muscle, vein, and eye tissue that is both medically infeasible and Hellraiser levels of disturbing. Okay, one more before I move on. Meat, Dog's friends, is one of the worst episodes. In this one, Dog realizes for the first time that meat comes from animals. And this is a shocking realization for many young humans, but Dog is supposed to be an adult. He reacts by deciding to become a vegetarian. Cat thinks that it's a terrible idea because dogs are carnivores. Dog has a nightmare of a hallucination in which the ghosts of meat-based foods he's eaten appears. As the episode unfolds, everything from vegetables to rocks tell him they're friends, not food. Eventually Dog goes completely off the deep end and tries to eat Cat, since Cat is his brother and not a friend. After a terrifying sequence where Dog snaps, growls, and tries to cook his sibling, the whole thing is resolved. Gee, thanks CatDog for making all of our brains explode.
Coming in at number 3, we have Tales from the Crypt Keeper. Tales from the Crypt Keeper is an animated TV series which aired on YTV in Canada back in the 90s and was based on the 1950s EC comic series Tales from the Crypt, as well as the live-action TV series of the same name. However, Tales from the Crypt Keeper was certainly milder, with it being made for children. However, saying that, it still managed to pack a punch and a lot of scares. The series details the Crypt Keeper telling different horror stories to the viewers, each with a lesson to be learned. Very educational. However, the episodes are genuinely twisted, with some of them being truly terrifying. For example, the episode Gorilla's Paw is essentially a retelling of W.W. Jacobs' The Monkey's Paw, which follows an unpopular kid who steals a gorilla's paw in order to be a part of a secret club, but he quickly discovers that the paw can grant wishes with twisted results. Or more terrifying still, the Haunted Mine episode, which follows a boy who visits his aunt, during which time he finds himself stuck inside of an abandoned mine, filled with unusual shapes and dark secrets. Spooky stuff. Coming in at number 2, Aaahh! Real Monsters. One of my favourite shows growing up, which says a lot. Aaahh! Real Monsters is a cartoon which aired on Nickelodeon and focused on 3 young monsters. Icus, Ablina, and Crumb, who attend a school for monsters under a city dump and learn to frighten humans. The show still haunts me to this day, with it including some of the scariest monsters I've ever seen. That's a bit of a stretch, but I mean it. For example, Massage Monster, who looked like this, or the Library Monster, who looked like this. Lovely stuff and definitely child friendly. The show is garish but blissfully silly, with wildly perverse humour that many children would certainly not understand, nor should they. There is also Grumble, a tall green-blue monster with 2 tufts of hair, a beard and a tail, and wears a belt and a red pump on each of his 4 feet. Grumble's assistant is Zimbo, voiced by Tim Curry, a horror icon, who resembles a bee with 1 mammalian leg and a humanoid face with green hair, all sounding pretty frightening to a small child, right? Honestly, I still think about the show and how it affected my life. I think it really made me who I am as a person, which is royally f***ed in the head. I kind of love that though. And finally, coming in at number 1, Courage the Cowardly Dog. Courage the Cowardly Dog is an animated horror comedy series that aired on the Cartoon Network back in the late 90s/early 2000s. Now, the show follows the title character, a pink anthropomorphic dog who lives with an elderly couple in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. For the most part, in each episode, the trio are thrown into bizarre and disturbing misadventures, which tend to involve the paranormal and supernatural. However, for a show that is aimed towards children, it certainly had a fascination with dark, surreal humour and horror atmosphere. Now, the show successfully embraced all manner of horror, creating a show that lingered in the minds of many children for years. Some of the particularly chilling episodes included King Ramses' Curse, as well as the House of Discontent, the latter following the trio being plagued by poltergeists that need them to grow crops, otherwise they'll be forced to leave the farm. The series even dedicates a few episodes to classic horror movies which children would of course know nothing about, at the time anyway. For example, the episode Demon in the Mattress featured Muriel being possessed by a demonic mattress, a clear homage to The Exorcist, a film certainly not made for children. Even now as an adult, it's hard not to feel an overwhelming sense of discomfort when watching Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Being Ian. Here's a Canadian deep cut for all of you. If you've seen this show, please let me know. I have no idea what the viewer base is actually like. It seems like there's a big internet blind spot on it. I loved this series growing up because it was all about a kid who loved to make movies. I aspired to be like Ian, roping my friends into half-ass harebrained productions featuring ninjas and weird video game references, and inexplicably a lot of discussions surrounding the creation of food and drink. Most episodes were built around references to classic movies, stuff like Indiana Jones, Jaws, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Hell, I even think there was a Citizen Kane episode at one point. But one stands out above the rest and really activated my creepy senses. Scream Because I Know What You Did to That Psycho Last Summer. What a title, eh? Of course, it was a big old mishmash of a bunch of well-known horror movies, and this also describes the episode itself. Now, if you're going into a horror movie, you expect people to get killed off in all sorts of creative ways, but when you're watching a cartoon, Not likely. Ian and his family are on a road trip and some odd happenings begin, well, happening. People start disappearing with little to no explanation, and as the journey continues, the disappearances become more sinister. Nods to the movies referenced in the title are everywhere, but a kid is less likely to understand these references. They just see a bunch of horror movie highlights claiming the lives of innocent cartoon characters. In the end, there's a wild reveal akin to the ending of the original Psycho. This is something that nobody in theaters back in 1960 were ready for, let alone a bunch of media illiterate children. So needless to say, kids should be warned before diving into this episode. Thankfully, it ends on a positive note, but still. Coming in at number 4, we've got the marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. My goodness, is this ever a strange show. I think it made a big name for itself largely through hyper-realistic cutaways and stills. The characters are all fun and games from a distance, but once the hypothetical camera cuts in real close, there can be some very disturbing discoveries. We follow the marvelous misadventures of a young lad named Flapjack, raised by a whale and dropped off at a rough and tumbled pirate-filled harbor. Flapjack is looked after by an old pirate named Knuckles, who convinces him to ditch his peaceful life and join him on his quest to find the Candied Island. Lesson 1. Don't follow weird old men with promises of candy. There's always something weird going on, and young Flapjack never seems to notice. This often leads to questionable and often disturbing situations. Pirates and other surly sailors aren't often known for their good behavior and friendliness, and this is on full display in the harbor. Crime and violence are abound, and that's only the start of it. There's one particularly famous instance of terror that stems from an odd little cat. Flapjack, being the incorrigible young lad he is, sights a little cat and goes to play with it. Here's what the cat looked like up close. What? On a kids show? This isn't the only creepypasta-worthy image to come from the show either. Here's another one with Flapjack himself being the object of terror. And here's one just for fun. A young boy interacting with Flapjack who turns out to be 38. Just look at it. My word, they really mastered the creepy cut-in, haven't they? I must say, this all seems like a lot for kids to take in.
Considering Angela Anaconda never shoved its Canadianness in your face the same way shows like Yvonne of the Yukon and Being Ian would, you'd be forgiven for thinking it was an American production. But the animated monstrosity of Sue Rose and Joanna Ferrone had one trait unique to Canadian media, a bizarrely unique art style that was equal parts stunning and horrifying. This series was actually quite popular around the turn of the century, with 65 episodes made and broadcasted in 35 countries around the world. It even had a super weird short before Digimon the movie, where all of the residents from Angela's town lined up to watch the movie. So this show chronicles the life and times of an imaginative girl and her adventures in and outside of elementary school. It was a show about friendship, creativity, and finding the bright side of life whenever Angela's rival Nanette would rain on her parade in broken French. Angela is most often joined by her best friends Gina Lash, Johnny Stereotype, and more. And the show was surprisingly quite violent. In each episode, the story arc is interrupted with a dream sequence in which Angela conjures imaginative and often gory ways to get rid of her nemesis. She imagines her getting injured in an ice skating trick gone wrong, fed to piranhas, and other things I can't even repeat. Decode Entertainment used black and white photos of actual real-life faces and blended them with cartoon bodies to create this whole show. It was almost like those paper dolls where you cut and paste outfits onto a cartoon's body, but it was only creepier. The 2D arts and crafts style was actually achieved through a state-of-the-art 3D program. As for why everybody looked black and white and gray when the rest of the world was in color, I don't have answers. Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Folks was an animated horror show with a claymation intro and numerous cautionary tales where folks would receive extremely ruthless comeuppances for flaws of heavily varying seriousnesses. This show originated in the UK but was broadcast worldwide, and the episodes were adapted from a book series of the same name by Jamie Ricks. So each episode had a framing device set in an old movie theater named the Squeam Screen, with its creepy caretaker and his spider companion Spindleshanks. The adapted stories are short movies on film reels that the caretaker screens from the projector into the theater, after he finishes talking to the audience about morals and proverbs that are later going to relate to the episode. Speaking of which, in one awful episode called The Barber of Civil, there's a hairdresser who chopped off the tongues of folks who were being rude and foul-mouthed. And if that doesn't sound terrifying, it was weird to watch. Another highlight, a boy who tormented spiders, and in retaliation, they entered his body and spun webs along his ribs. Yeah, we're moving on before I start jumping from fear. And finally for today, we've got Numberjacks. This was a British animated series that focused on math. About 67 episodes were produced. So the Numberjacks are a group of anthropomorphic numbers who team up on a mission. You've got turquoise 5, yellow 6, dark blue 4, and pink 3. They go about their everyday lives inside their sofa until they get get a call from real-life agents who report problems that need solving. So then you get one or two of the Numberjacks who fly out on location to investigate. They have to work out how to put things right and thwart the dastardly intentions of the 5 meanies. So while the Numberjacks characters are kind of off-putting on their own, there's one meanie who takes the cake for most terrifying. Yes, he's live action, but I think we can make an exception. The Number Taker is male, the largest meanie, and always silent. He causes trouble by taking numbers and numbers of things, and the sleeves of his long white coat hide various attachments. We're talking vacuum cleaner, a magnet, a net, a hook, and a number sucker upper. Also, just look at him. He's freaky even for grown-ups. He's played by the same actor who was a White Walker in Game of Thrones, for crying out loud. Into my nightmares goes this show.